Do you know that children who experience their parents getting divorced while growing up are 50% more likely to get divorced over children who never experienced any divorce while growing up? Additionally, children who experience 2 or more divorces while growing up, that is, my father got divorced to my mom, got remarried, and divorced again. Now, these children are 200% more likely to get divorced over children who never experienced any divorce at all. Hello, my name is Victor Akan, and I would like to welcome you to yet again another episode of my Breath of Hope podcast. And in this episode, we'll be focusing on divorces and the eventual effect it has on children. John Maxwell once said in his book, 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, children don't do what you tell them, they do what you do. Basically, what that means is that your children watch you like a movie, and within your actions, they see some sort of moral guidelines of what they should do and what they should not do. Hence, they see a window of possibilities of what should be. I'll give an example. While growing up, there was a time I think I was about 5 or 6. I saw my mom and my dad have this very heated argument. And my mom held the shirt, right? And my father was like, let me go. My mom was like, I won't let you go. I can't remember the rest, but my mom was really aggressive towards my dad. Now, my dad did not retaliate by, holding my mom's shirt or hitting her or anything, right? Eventually she tore his shirt and he was like, hope you're happy now. And he walked away. And in that very moment, subconsciously, I had learned that regardless of the situation, I should never lay my hands on a woman. What if my father, out of anger, I said, are you mad? And then he slapped my mother back. I would have learned something different. As a child of 5, 6, I would have learned something different. That there are certain situations that come for certain actions, right? So if my woman dares challenge me to a certain extent that provokes me, I should slap her, right? I should discipline her. But then again, my father didn't do that. So what I was exposed to at such a young age was part of the things that shaped my mind. And what does this tell you? This tells you that as a child, you see the extent of your capability to how your parents respond to issues to a large extent. And it's when you grow up that, you have 2 options, right? First of all, you just continue living within that boundaries of possibility. Secondly, you become self-aware and exposed, and you try to break out of those capabilities or those limitations. Going back memory lane, this is my personal story, right? My dad had a whole lot of respect for my mom, right? She was really good, at least to the best of my memory, right? We all remembered him as a good father, most importantly as a good husband. And even after he died, while growing up, of course, my sisters had a whole lot of encounters, right? Love stories and things like that. And even when they had heartbreak or they heard of bad situations or bad stories, they always say things like, I believe I can find true love. I believe I can see a man like my father. Why? Because while they grew up, they saw a reality. They got to understand that it was possible for a woman to experience true love, good love, kind love. Of course, that was my mom, right? And it was in that exposure that they built a certain expectation. They had faith in a certain expectation and reality. And this is why being so kind to your spouse is very important, because you're not just benefiting off it, in your marriage, right? Or your spouse isn't just benefiting it. Your children are watching. And what that means for them is that if they see you react a certain way, right, when certain things happen, then they know that it is okay to react that way. And that is the mindset that they go and carry through life. So what that means is that when you're kind to your partner, your children see it. So they understand the importance of kindness, even when kindness is not deserved. When you're a vindictive and vengeful person, your children see it. And so they will carry on the same pattern of living or the same behavioral traits. Now, in cases where, there is some sort of cycle of toxicity, bitterness, hatred, unfaithfulness, and all of those stuff that lead to, basic divorces, your children are affected in one of 2 major ways. Of course, there are different ways, kids are affected. But studies have shown that these are 2 of the major ways your kids are affected. Now, it was proven that children at a very young age, so let's say you were 2 or 3, you saw your parents get divorced, there is a certain mark it has on you. You tend to grow up, especially if, it was a very messy divorce and one parent has to stay away for a very long time. Now, you end up growing, feeling like you're not good enough. If you were good enough, your parents should have tried to make it work, right? At least for your sake, right? And in cases where it is a very messy divorce, because the child usually stays more with the mom, right? And the father now has limited access to the child's life. Now, the child may grow up feeling unwanted, may grow up feeling like he isn't good enough, right? May grow up feeling like he isn't worth it, questioning his value and things like that. Now, in a case whereby a child is, say, in his teenage years and he has a little understanding about what life is about, and then the parents are beginning to fight, go through all of those messy things and eventually get a divorce, the child is just going to think, these are my heroes. And if the people I look up to, this thing called marriage, marriage is a beautiful thing, right? Marriage is something that was born out of love. And this thing that was born out of love was what gave birth to me, right? And if this thing, could eventually get so messy, then why should I believe in marriage, right? And so some children actually grow up believing that marriage is not worth it. And so you hear some people say things like, I just want to be free, I don't care about marriage, marriage is a scam and things like that, right? And they kind of sound woke, but sometimes underneath all of those prideful sayings, those boastful sayings, there is someone that is broken inside. There is someone that experienced things that a child should not have experienced, and because of that, he has now built a shield, right? He has built a shield to now say that rather than go through this painful and bitter experiences, I rather just be by myself. I rather just have an open relationship. I rather just just do without any strings attached, just to protect myself, so that this pain that my parents went through, but that my mom went through, I don't have to go through it. And so I'm going to give two perfect examples, right, of the consequences of divorce, especially messy divorces, right? So in a case whereby the girl is young, I'm going to give an example. I'm going to give an example with Susan. Now, Susan grows up. When she was 3 years old, her father got divorced from my mom, right? So she has to stay with her mom most of the time. And her father isn't always present in her life. Of course, he does his best, right? But because of the strained, relationship between him and her mom, she doesn't always get to see her dad. And so Susan grows up feeling very insecure, feeling like she isn't good enough, feeling like if she was good enough, her parents should have tried to work it out because of her at least. But because they didn't, then she isn't good enough. So Susan is going to try to look for validation in other places. Why? Because human beings are social beings and the need for validation is essential. And as a child, especially as a girl child who looks up to her father as her first love, as her first hero, because there wasn't enough, sufficient time, for the father to have bonded with her. Also, secondly, because there wasn't any model to show what love looks like, at the very basic level between the husband and the wife. So she grows up, 1, missing that fatherly care and attention. 2, not experiencing what true love between a husband and a wife should look like. She grows up, craving for that love, craving for that attention, and while at the other hand, be feeling insecure, feeling like she isn't good enough. And so she grows up. Today she's with this guy, next week she's with another guy. Basically she's just trying to see which guy can try to fill that void that she has inside of her. And because she is insecure, she questions the fact that her parents, couldn't make it work, even because of her. So she feels like she isn't good enough. And so in any relationship that she is in, she's going to question, her worth in that relationship. And guess what? She will be scared that that thing that her father or her mother saw that made it seem like she wasn't good enough to stay and fight for, the marriage, maybe her man will eventually see that thing. And if she sees that thing, maybe he's going to walk away. So now that is now going to sponsor that insecure feeling that she has. So when, they have a little fight in her mind, she's like, hope he hasn't seen this thing that other people are seeing, at least on the subconscious level. Hope he hasn't seen this thing that other people are seeing, and she's not going to walk out because of that. When she feels that way, she's going to make, certain remarks, right, that will make it look like, this guy, that will make the guy feel like, this lady doesn't think I love her enough. And at first, it might seem cute because the guy will try to, prove himself, I love you, I'm here for you, let me prove to this lady that I can fight for her. But over time, like everything with human beings hate to prove themselves for so long, right? Because what that means is that you don't trust them, you don't trust their intentions. So over time, the guy will get tired and he will walk away eventually. And she's off to the next person, repeating the same cycle, or the same endless cycle of insecurities over our relationships, right? But little does that guy know that it isn't really about him. It's about a person who was broken right from the start, who has a void that needs to be felt, right? And so it's going to take a very deep person who understands this lady to be able to help her through it. Second scenario, and this scenario comes from a true life story. I used to like this person in school, right? There's this lady I really loved back in my school days. And this lady had a mom who went through 2 divorces. The first divorce was probably when she was, probably 10 or before 10. And the second divorce was, when she was in her teenage years, maybe advanced teenage years. Now, this lady would see a guy today, shows so much interest in that guy. And after like a month, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, she loses interest. Begins to treat the guy like shit. Blocks his number, and if the guy persists and things like that. Of course, I shouldn't tell you how the story went with me, right? But you get the drift. Now, at first, I felt like this lady is not alright upstairs. But eventually, when I got to get exposed to things like this and I realized her background, I realized that she was acting from a place of fear. So because she saw her parents go through certain messy divorces, she saw her mom try love again and still failed again. It now, did something to her mind, whereby whenever she wants to commit, she gets scared and pulls off and tries to be as mean as possible to the person, right? But other people from the outside think that this lady is not normal, but they are not seeing the fact that this person is someone who is struggling, right? So she might feel a thing, but she has a preconceived notion, a fear, a deeper fear that says that if your mom, if your dad, your hero could try and they failed, we saw how something beautiful could turn sour. What is the assurance that your own will be any different? And so from there, you see that fear take control of her, and so she cuts off and she tries to, be the villain in your life before you are the villain in her own life. And that's her way of protecting herself. And so you would realize that if the lady in scenario 1 were to find a guy who is patient enough to get married to her, or the lady in scenario 2 was to fall so, head heel in love with somebody that she's willing to let go of her fears and just go into the marriage, the first person who always feels insecure will probably put a huge strain on that marriage. And what that, consequentially means is that the person will eventually get tired and, one thing might lead to the other, and you have a divorce on your hands. The second lady, right, in question, who doesn't believe in love but got married, the moment there's a first sign of trouble, she's like, I knew this was never going to work, right? And that's because in your mind, when you set your heart to do something, right, but you're like, let me just do this thing, even though you have a preconceived notion that, this thing does not work. The moment there's a first reason to leave, you walk away. And so you see that it is indeed possible, through the mindset at least, that a child, whose mindset was affected by watching their parents get divorced, will be more likely to get divorced in future. And thereby you would notice something, a pattern is repeating. So what are the ways to, get through all of these things? What, as a person who watched your parents get divorced, you don't have interest in getting married, or you're scared that you're not enough, how do you get over this feeling? How do you battle? How do you overcome this mindset? Why not wait with me while I release my next episode on Valentine's Day? Thank you so much for your time. Can't wait to see you. Bye.